A forbidden bond. In the lush and vibrant village of Iroko, nestled between rolling hills and thick forest, there lived a woman named Naya. She was the kind of beauty that stopped conversations and turned heads. Her dark, luminous eyes seemed to hold secrets, and her quick wit made her the center of attention at every gathering. But behind the charm and the disarming smile lay an ambition as sharp as a blade. Naya was no ordinary woman. She was cunning, calculating, and determined to get whatever she wanted. Naya had long set her sights on Olu, the village's most respected warrior. Olu was a man of strength, courage, and honor, a protector of the people and a symbol of hope during times of trouble. To Naya, Olu was more than a warrior. He was the key to elevating her status within the village. She saw in him not only a future husband but also an opportunity to secure her place as a revered figure in Iroko. However, Olu saw Naya only as a friend. They had grown up together, often playing near the river as children and sharing dreams of a bright future. But as they grew older, Olu's heart was never moved in the way Naya's was. He admired her intelligence and charm but felt no deeper connection. For Olu, Naya was a companion, nothing more. Everything changed when Olu met Adia, a gentle healer from the neighboring village of Abini. Adia was nothing like Naya. Where Naya was bold and captivating, Adia was serene and kind. Her hands carried the magic of healing, and her heart was as pure as the streams that flowed between their villages. Olu was drawn to her quiet strength and the way her laughter seemed to light up even the darkest days. Their love blossomed quickly, and soon, Olu and Adia were inseparable. They would walk hand in hand through the markets of Iroko, their laughter echoing through the streets. It wasn't long before Olu announced their engagement, to the delight of both Iroko and Abini. The villagers celebrated the union, believing it would strengthen the bond between their two communities. But for Naya, the news was like a dagger to the heart. The man she had dreamed of, the future she had meticulously planned, was slipping through her fingers. Every smile Olu shared with Adia, every whispered word between them, felt like a personal betrayal. She tried to hide her bitterness, but her heart burned with jealousy. In the privacy of her hut, Naya sat by the flickering light of a small fire, her thoughts swirling like a storm. How dare she whispered to herself. I was there first. I was by his side when no one else was. And now, this healer comes from nowhere and takes him from me. The firelight danced in her eyes as her jealousy hardened into resolve. If she couldn't have Olu, no one would. She began to hatch a plan, one that would not only destroy Olu and Adia's love but also disrupt the fragile peace between the villages of Iroko and Abini. This village will regret underestimating me, Naya muttered, her voice as sharp as the blade she toyed with in her hand. And Adia will learn the price of stealing what's mine. Outside, the village buzzed with excitement over the upcoming wedding. But within Naya's heart, a darkness was growing, a darkness that would soon threaten not just Olu and Adia but the entire village of Iroko, the priestess's warning. The days grew longer as preparations for Olu and Adia's wedding filled the air with excitement. But while the village of Iroko rejoiced, Naya's heart festered with bitterness. Every laugh, every congratulatory word exchanged between the couple only deepened her resentment. Desperate for a way to end their happiness, Naya decided to seek out the one person who might hold the answers she needed, the priestess of the sacred hills. The priestess was a mysterious figure, feared and respected across the land. She lived in isolation atop the rugged sacred hills, shrouded by swirling mist and ancient trees. Many sought her wisdom, but few returned without carrying the weight of her cryptic warnings. Determined to find a solution, Naya packed a small bag with offerings, beads, dried herbs, and a carved wooden figurine, things said to please the priestess. At dawn, she set out alone, her footsteps echoing on the forest path. The journey was treacherous, with winding trails and steep climbs, but Naya's determination fueled her every step. By the time she reached the summit, the sun was sinking low, casting an eerie orange glow over the hills. The priestess's hut stood in the center of a clearing, its walls adorned with symbols that seemed to hum with an unseen power. Naya hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, her heart pounding. As she approached, the door creaked open, and the priestess emerged. She was an old woman, her hair white as snow, her piercing eyes like pools of liquid silver. Draped in a cloak of woven leaves, she moved with an otherworldly grace. "I know why you've come," the priestess said before Naya could speak. Her voice was deep and resonant, as though it carried the weight of centuries. "You seek to disrupt what was never yours to claim." Naya stiffened but quickly regained her composure. "I've come for guidance," she said carefully, lowering her head in a show of respect. "Olu and Adia's union is a mistake. I need your help to stop it." The priestess tilted her head, studying Naya as though peering into her very soul. "Jealousy is a powerful force," she said. "It blinds the heart and poisons the spirit. I warn you, child, if you continue down this path, your own hatred will consume you." But Naya, stubborn and unyielding, refused to heed the warning. "I'll pay any price," she insisted. "Just tell me what to do." The priestess sighed and turned toward her hut, motioning for Naya to follow. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning incense. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of strange powders and dried plants. In the center of the room stood a stone altar etched with runes. From one of the shelves, the priestess retrieved an ancient scroll. "This," she said, unrolling the parchment, "is the curse of shadows. It is forbidden and dangerous, meant to bring ruin upon those you envy. But mark my words, every curse comes with a cost." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "Once you set this in motion, the forces you summon will turn on you. There will be no escape." Naya's fingers trembled as she took the scroll, but her mind was made up. "Thank you," she said, bowing deeply. "I will repay you for your wisdom." "You already have," the priestess replied cryptically, her gaze heavy with sorrow. Naya returned to Iroko under the cover of darkness, clutching the scroll tightly. The priestess's warning echoed in her mind, but she dismissed it as the ramblings of an old woman. She had the power now, and she intended to use it. Days turned into weeks, and Naya watched Olu and Adia from the shadows. They seemed happier than ever, their love unshaken by anything around them. One afternoon, she saw them walking hand in hand by the river, Adia's face glowing with joy. It wasn't long before the news spread, Adia was expecting a child. The village erupted in celebration, elders blessing the unborn baby and proclaiming it a symbol of unity between Iroko and Abeni. For Naya, the news was unbearable. Her hatred swelled like a storm, drowning out any last shred of doubt. The sight of Olu doting on Adia, the sound of villagers praising their love, it was too much. "I will not let them have this happiness," she muttered to herself, her fist clenched. "I will take it all away." Late one night, Naya unrolled the scroll and began to study the curse of shadows. The instructions were written in an ancient language, but the symbols seemed to glow faintly, guiding her like whispers in the dark. The curse required a personal item from her target, as well as a ritual performed under the full moon. Naya knew she would have to act quickly. The next full moon was only a few days away. Under the guise of friendship, she visited Olu and Adia's home, pretending to congratulate them on their pregnancy. During the visit, she secretly took a piece of Adia's scarf, which she would use in the ritual. As she walked back to her hut, the wind seemed to howl around her, and the shadows of the trees stretched unnaturally long. The air grew colder, and for a moment, Naya thought she heard a voice, soft, chilling, and filled with warning. "Turn back," it whispered. "Turn back before it's too late." But Naya only tightened her grip on the scarf and quickened her pace. The path had already been set, and she would see it through to the end, no matter the cost, the curse unleashed. The night of the full moon arrived, its silver light bathing the village of Iroko in an eerie glow. While the villagers slept soundly, blissfully unaware of the brewing danger, Naya prepared for the ritual that would forever alter their lives. In the secluded depths of the forest, far from prying eyes, she set up an altar of stones and bones. At its center, she placed the piece of Adia's scarf she had stolen, along with a vial of Olu's sweat she had collected during one of his training sessions. The air was heavy with tension as Naya drew the ancient symbols from the scroll on the ground around the altar. She whispered the forbidden incantations, her voice trembling but resolute. The scroll had warned her that the ritual would summon the spirits of shadows, ancient entities known for their cruelty and unpredictable nature. But Naya's hatred had grown too strong to care about the consequences. As her voice reached the final word of the incantation, the air grew cold. The forest fell deathly silent, and a dark mist began to rise from the ground. It swirled around Naya, whispering in voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "What do you seek?" the spirits hissed in unison, their voices like the rustling of dry leaves. "I seek to destroy the happiness of Olu and Adia," Naya said, her voice steady despite the chill that gripped her. "Take their joy, take their peace. Leave them with nothing but misery." The spirits laughed, a sound that echoed like thunder through the forest. "You have summoned us, mortal, and we shall grant your wish. But know this, the darkness you call upon will not leave you untouched. Are you prepared to pay the price?" "Yes," Naya replied, her voice sharp with determination. "Do it." The mist thickened, and the spirits surged toward the altar, engulfing the items Naya had placed there. The scarf and vial disintegrated into ash as the spirits vanished into the night, leaving Naya alone in the clearing. The forest seemed darker than before, the silence more oppressive. For the first time, a shiver of fear ran down her spine. The effects of the curse were immediate. Olu, once vibrant and full of strength, began to feel weak and sluggish. He struggled during his training sessions, his movements heavy and uncoordinated. Adia, too, seemed to be plagued by a sense of unease. Her once cheerful demeanor dimmed, and shadows grew beneath her eyes as she became increasingly restless. But Naya was not content to let the curse work alone. She knew the Zuba clan, Iroko's longtime enemy, had been searching for an opportunity to strike. Using her cunning, she sent a secret message to the Zuba clan leader, revealing the village's weak points and the exact timing when Olu, the strongest defender of Iroko, would be at his most vulnerable. "The village is unprotected," she wrote. "Olu, their warrior, has grown weak, and their strongest fighters are spread thin. Strike during the next harvest festival, when the village will be distracted." To ensure Olu would be completely incapacitated during the attack, Naya prepared a special poison. It was a subtle blend of herbs that would weaken his body further without arousing suspicion. Pretending to be a kind friend, she visited Olu and Adia, bringing them a pot of stew laced with the poison. "Congratulations on your growing family," Naya said sweetly as she handed Adia the pot. "I made this for you. You've been working so hard, you deserve to rest." Adia, unaware of Naya's true intentions, thanked her warmly. That evening, as Olu and Adia ate the stew, the poison began to take effect. Olu's strength dwindled further, leaving him barely able to stand without feeling dizzy. The night of the raid arrived. As Naya had predicted, the Zuba clan attacked during the harvest festival, when the village was at its most vulnerable. Fires lit up the sky as the invaders tore through Iroko, destroying homes and capturing villagers. Olu tried to rise and defend his people, but his body betrayed him. He collapsed, unable to lift his sword, while Adia cried out for help. Naya watched from the shadows, a mixture of triumph and guilt swirling within her. She had achieved her goal. Olu and Adia's happiness lay in ruins. But as the flames consumed the village and the screams of her people echoed in her ears, an unease began to settle in her chest. That night, as she lay in her bed, the spirits she had summoned returned to her in her dreams. They appeared as dark, shifting figures, their laughter cruel and mocking. "You thought you could wield us without consequence," they taunted. "Foolish mortal. You have unleashed darkness not only upon them but upon yourself." In her dream, Naya found herself standing in a desolate version of Iroko. The village was empty, the land barren, and the air thick with despair. Shadows surrounded her, pulling at her limbs, whispering her fears and regrets. "Your jealousy will be your undoing," the spirits hissed. "The curse you unleashed will devour all, including you." Naya woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. The room felt suffocating, as though the shadows themselves were closing in. She tried to shake off the feeling, convincing herself it was just a dream. But deep down, she knew the spirit's warning was not an empty threat. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Naya realized she could no longer enjoy the victory she had sought. The happiness she had destroyed was now a weight on her soul, and the price of her actions was only beginning to reveal itself, the night of betrayal. The night of the attack descended like a shroud over the village of Iroko. The air was warm and filled with the laughter and music of the harvest festival, as villagers danced and celebrated the bounty of their land. No one, not even Olu, suspected the impending doom. Naya watched the festivities from the shadows, her eyes cold and calculating. Tonight, her plan would come to fruition. Olu, already weakened by the poison, felt an unusual exhaustion creep over him as the night wore on. His head grew heavy, his vision blurred, and soon he could barely stand. Adia noticed his condition and rushed to his side. "Olu, you don't look well," she said, her voice filled with concern. "You should rest." Reluctantly, Olu allowed Adia to help him back to their hut. He collapsed onto their bed, his body drained of all strength. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he murmured, his voice weak. "I need to stay awake in case something happens." Adia stroked his forehead gently. "You've been working too hard, my love. Rest. I'll keep watch." Within moments, Olu was in a deep, unnatural sleep. Adia sat beside him, unaware that the food Naya had gifted them was the cause of his condition. As she watched over her husband, a sudden pain gripped her abdomen. She gasped, clutching her belly. The baby was coming, and the timing couldn't have been worse. As the moon reached its zenith, the first sounds of chaos erupted from the edge of the village. The Zuba clan, fierce and ruthless, descended upon Iroko like a storm. Fire sprang up, illuminating the night with an orange glow. The clash of steel, the screams of villagers, and the shouts of the invaders filled the air. Homes were torched, crops trampled, and families torn apart as the Zuba warriors showed no mercy. Naya stood on a hill overlooking the carnage, her heart a mix of emotions. The sight of the village burning brought her a twisted sense of satisfaction. "This is what you get, Olu," she whispered to herself. "You and Adia thought you could take everything from me. Now I've taken it all from you." But as she watched women and children flee in terror and heard the cries of the wounded, a flicker of guilt stirred within her. For a moment, she questioned the price of her revenge. Yet the bitterness in her heart quickly snuffed out any remorse. "They deserve this," she told herself firmly. "All of them." Back in their hut, Adia struggled through her labor pains, her cries drowned out by the chaos outside. The midwife, who had been helping her earlier, had fled when the attack began, leaving Adia alone. She clung to her resolve, knowing she had to protect her unborn child. "Olu," she whispered through clenched teeth, glancing at her husband, who lay motionless on the bed. "Please wake up. I need you." But Olu didn't stir. The poison held him in a deep, unnatural slumber, rendering him powerless to help his wife or defend his people. As the attack raged on, the door to their hut was kicked open. A Zuba warrior entered, his eyes scanning the room. Adia, trembling with fear, gritted her teeth and clutched a knife she had hidden beneath her blankets. She would fight, even in her weakened state. "Stay away," she shouted, her voice filled with both fear and determination. The warrior sneered and stepped closer. Adia lunged with the knife, slashing at him. She managed to wound him, but her strength was fading fast. The warrior retaliated, striking her down with a brutal blow. Adia fell to the ground, clutching her stomach as the pain intensified. As the flames outside crept closer and the screams of the villagers grew louder, Adia gave one final push. Her cries of agony turned into a soft gasp as a baby's wail pierced the night. She looked at her son, her vision blurring as blood poured beneath her. "You are my light," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Be strong, like your father." The Zuba warrior approached again, but before he could strike the infant, a sudden explosion outside distracted him. The hut began to collapse under the weight of the fire, forcing him to flee. Adia used her last ounce of strength to shield her newborn with her body, protecting him from the falling debris. As the flames consumed the hut, Adia drew her final breath. Outside, the Zuba clan continued their rampage. Naya, still watching from her perch, felt an unfamiliar hollowness in her chest. She had wanted revenge, but the destruction of the village felt far greater than she had anticipated. The spirit's warning echoed in her mind: "The darkness you call upon will not leave you untouched." For the first time, Naya wondered if she had made a mistake. But as the Zuba warriors retreated into the night, their task complete, she pushed the thought aside. "It's done," she muttered. "There's no going back now." The next morning, the village of Iroko was unrecognizable. Smoke hung heavy in the air, and the cries of the wounded filled the silence. Survivors searched for their loved ones among the ruins, their faces etched with despair. Olu finally woke, his body still weak but his mind sharp with confusion. He stumbled through the wreckage, calling out for Adia. When he reached their hut, all that remained was a smoldering pile of ash. The midwife, who had returned to help search for survivors, handed him a small, soot-covered bundle, a baby boy, crying but alive. "Your wife," the midwife began, her voice breaking. She didn't make it. But she saved your son." Olu fell to his knees, clutching the infant to his chest. His heart shattered as he realized what had happened. "Adia, my love," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I failed you." As he held his son, Olu vowed to protect him at all cost. But the weight of his grief and guilt was immense, and the seed of suspicion began to grow in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone had betrayed them, that someone had made the attack possible. From the shadows, Naya watched Olu cradle his child. Her triumph now felt hollow, the guilt she had suppressed growing heavier with each passing moment. Little did she know, her actions had set a chain of events into motion that would soon lead to her own undoing. A warrior's despair. The first rays of dawn broke through the smoky sky, revealing the devastation left in the wake of the Zuba clan's raid. The once thriving village of Iroko lay in ruins. Charred homes, toppled fences, and smoldering ashes were all that remained of what had been a bustling and joyous community. The air was heavy with grief as survivors gathered, mourning their losses and trying to make sense of the attack. Olu stirred from his sleep, his body still weakened from the poison. He sat up, his head spinning, and blinked at the wreckage around him. His heart dropped as he realized something was terribly wrong. His hut was gone, reduced to a pile of burnt wood and ash. "Adia," he called out, panic rising in his chest. "Adia, where are you?" He stumbled to his feet, his legs unsteady beneath him, and began searching the ruins. His voice grew hoarse as he called for his wife and child, but there was no answer. The other villagers avoided his gaze, their expressions filled with pity and sadness. Finally, an elder approached, her eyes brimming with tears. "Olu," she began softly. "I am so sorry. Your wife, she didn't survive." Her words hit Olu like a blow to the chest. His knees buckled, and he sank to the ground, his head in his hands. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "No, this can't be true. She was strong. She would have fought." "She did," the elder said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She saved your son. He was found alive amidst the ashes." Olu's head shot up. "My son. Where is he?" The elder hesitated, her face darkening with sorrow. "The Zuba clan took him. They captured many of our children and warriors before retreating." A fire ignited in Olu's chest. Despite his grief and weakened state, his instincts as a father and warrior surged to the forefront. "Then I'll go after them," he said, his voice hard with determination. "I'll bring him back." The elder looked at him with concern. "You're not strong enough, Olu. You can barely stand." "I don't care," Olu snapped. "I won't let them take my son." As Olu began preparing for his journey, the village gathered to grieve and rebuild. Amid the mourning, whispers began to spread, rumors of betrayal. How had the Zuba clan known the village's weak points? How had they struck so precisely when Olu, their strongest defender, was incapacitated? Meanwhile, Naya kept to herself, avoiding the accusatory glances of her fellow villagers. She tried to act as though she, too, was grieving the losses, but guilt weighed heavily on her heart. Every time she saw Olu, her chest tightened with the weight of her actions. She had wanted to destroy his happiness, but she hadn't anticipated the depth of the destruction she would unleash. Her paranoia only grew when the priestess of the sacred hills arrived in the village. The priestess had come to offer guidance and perform rituals for the dead, but her presence made Naya uneasy. She avoided the priestess as much as possible, but one evening, as the village gathered around a ceremonial fire, the priestess called out to her. "Naya," the priestess said, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "You carry a heavy burden. Come forward." Naya hesitated, her hands trembling. "I don't know what you mean, priestess," she said, forcing a smile. "I've done nothing wrong." The priestess's piercing gaze seemed to see through her lies. "The spirits tell me otherwise. They speak of betrayal, of darkness brought upon this village by your hand." The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to Naya. She shook her head vehemently. "That's not true. I love this village. I would never betray it." But the villagers began to murmur, their suspicions growing. The priestess stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "The spirits have warned you before, and yet you ignored them. Your jealousy has poisoned not only Olu and Adia but the entire village." "I did nothing," Naya shouted, her voice cracking. "You have no proof." The priestess narrowed her eyes. "Your heart speaks louder than your words, Naya. And the spirits are watching." That night, Naya's paranoia grew unbearable. She could feel the eyes of the villagers on her, their whispers haunting her wherever she went. Even in the silence of her own heart, she felt as though the shadows were closing in. The spirits she had summoned began appearing in her dreams again, their voices taunting her with the consequences of her actions. "You thought you could escape us," they hissed. "You cannot run from the darkness you unleashed." Meanwhile, Olu began his journey to track down the Zuba clan and rescue his son. Though his body was still weak, his determination gave him strength. Armed with only a sword and the knowledge of the Zuba clan's territory, he set off into the wilderness. The journey was grueling. The poison lingering in his system made every step a challenge, and his muscles ached with fatigue. But the thought of his son kept him moving forward. Along the way, he encountered signs of the Zuba clan's passage, trampled grass, abandoned campsites, and the occasional piece of cloth or jewelry left behind by captives. One night, as he rested by a fire, a lone traveler approached him. The man was cloaked in a tattered robe, his face obscured by a hood. "You seek the Zuba clan," the traveler said, his voice low and gravelly. Olu nodded wearily. "What do you know of them?" "They are not far," the man replied. "But be warned, they are ruthless, and they will not give up their captives easily." "I don't care," Olu said, his jaw set. "I'll do whatever it takes to bring my son back." The traveler nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Your resolve is admirable. But remember, strength alone will not save you. The heart of a father is a powerful weapon, use it wisely." Before Olu could respond, the traveler disappeared into the night, leaving only the faint scent of incense in his wake. Though puzzled by the encounter, Olu felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would not stop until his son was safe, no matter the cost. As he pressed on, the shadows of the past loomed ever larger. The village's betrayal, Naya's secret, and the curse that had poisoned his life were all converging, setting the stage for a reckoning that none could escape, the River of Judgment. The journey to the River of Shadows was treacherous. For days, Olu pressed forward, facing trial after trial. His path took him through dense forests where unseen creatures howled in the night, across barren plains where the sun scorched his skin, and over jagged cliffs that tested his endurance. Despite his weakened body, his resolve burned brighter than ever. The thought of his son, his only remaining connection to Adia, kept him moving. As Olu approached the river, he noticed the signs of the Zuba clan's camp. Smoke rose from a cluster of tents on the far bank, and the faint cries of captives carried through the air. The River of Shadows, named for its dark, swirling waters, stretched wide and menacing between Olu and his goal. Its current was swift and unforgiving, and legend held that those who attempted to cross it without pure intentions would be dragged to the depths by the spirits of the river. Olu knelt by the water, his reflection staring back at him. He thought of the countless lives lost during the raid, the ruins of his village, and the pain of losing Adia. "Spirits of the river," he whispered, his voice trembling, "I do not come for vengeance. I come for my son. Grant me the strength to cross." The wind stirred, rippling the surface of the river. Taking a deep breath, Olu stepped into the water. The current pulled at him immediately, but he pushed forward, clinging to a log he had fashioned into a makeshift raft. As he crossed, shadows danced beneath the surface, and whispers filled the air. "Your heart is heavy," the spirits seemed to say. "But your love is strong." When Olu reached the other side, his body was trembling with exhaustion, but his spirit was unbroken. He hid among the trees, watching the Zuba clan's camp. He could see the captives, men, women, and children, bound and guarded. Among them was a small bundle cradled by an older woman. Olu's heart raced. It was his son. Meanwhile, back in Iroko, the priestess of the sacred hills had begun a powerful ritual. She stood in the center of the village, surrounded by the remaining villagers, her voice rising in a haunting chant. Smoke from a sacred fire curled into the sky as she called upon the spirits of justice to reveal the truth behind the Zuba clan's attack. The villagers watched in silence as the smoke began to twist and take shape. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the air. "A heart consumed by jealousy has betrayed this village." The smoke swirled, forming an image of Naya, her face contorted with rage as she performed the forbidden ritual to curse Olu and Adia. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the truth was laid bare. The priestess turned to the villagers. "You have seen the truth. Naya's actions brought ruin upon us all. Her betrayal must be answered." Naya, who had been hiding on the outskirts of the gathering, stepped forward, trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she stammered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." The villagers, their grief now mixed with fury, began shouting. "You doomed us all," one cried. "You cursed Olu and destroyed our village," another yelled. The crowd surged forward, demanding justice. Naya's eyes darted around, panic overtaking her. She turned and fled into the forest, the angry voices of the villagers fading behind her. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing by the edge of a small creek. The forest was silent, save for the sound of her ragged breathing. For the first time, Naya truly felt the weight of her actions. The spirits had warned her, but she had ignored them, and now she was alone, haunted by her own choices. Back at the River of Shadows, Olu waited for nightfall to make his move. As darkness cloaked the camp, he crept toward the captives. He dispatched a lone guard silently, his movements calculated despite his weakened state. Reaching the group of prisoners, he quickly located the older woman holding his son. "Who are you?" the woman whispered, clutching the baby tightly. "I am his father," Olu replied, his voice steady. "I've come to take him home." The woman hesitated, then handed the baby over. "Be quick," she said. "They'll notice soon." But just as Olu turned to leave, a shout rang out. "Intruder!" A Zuba warrior had spotted him, and chaos erupted in the camp. Olu, holding his son tightly against his chest, fought his way through the warriors. His movements were slower than usual, his body still weak from the poison, but he fought with the desperation of a father protecting his child. A blade slashed across his arm, and another struck his side, but Olu didn't stop. He used every ounce of strength he had to reach the riverbank. With the warriors closing in, he plunged into the river, clutching his son as the current swept them away. The river's icy water stung his wounds, and the current threatened to pull him under, but Olu held on. His vision blurred as exhaustion and blood loss took their toll. Just as he began to lose consciousness, a pair of hands pulled him from the water. It was the priestess, who had been waiting on the riverbank, guided by the spirits. "Olu," she said, her voice filled with both sorrow and admiration. "You have endured much." Olu, barely able to speak, handed his son to her. "Protect him," he whispered. "He is all that's left." The priestess nodded, cradling the baby. "Rest now, brave warrior. Your strength will not be forgotten." As Olu's eyes closed, the priestess carried the child back toward the village. Behind her, the river seemed to glow faintly, as though the spirits were watching over them. In the forest, Naya wandered aimlessly, the shadows closing in around her. The whispers of the spirits grew louder, their voices filled with condemnation. "You brought this upon yourself," they said. "Your jealousy has destroyed you." Naya fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for this to happen." But the spirits offered no mercy. The shadows engulfed her, and as she screamed, her voice was lost to the forest. The story of Olu's sacrifice and Naya's betrayal would become a legend in Iroko. The villagers rebuilt their lives, guided by the priestess and the strength of Olu's son, who would one day grow into a warrior as brave as his father. The curse comes full circle. The forest around Naya was no longer a place of refuge. Once a haven of beauty and serenity, it had become her prison. The shadows seemed alive, whispering her darkest fears and regrets. She wandered aimlessly, her heart heavy with the weight of her betrayal. Every night, the spirits she had summoned returned, their laughter echoing through the trees. Their tones grew louder, their presence more suffocating. "You wanted power, Naya," they sneered. "Now you have nothing. You are nothing." One moonless night, as Naya stumbled through the underbrush, her body began to change. Her hands twisted into clawed paws, her face elongated into a snout, and her once beautiful form became a grotesque half-beast. Her screams filled the forest, but there was no one to hear her cries. The transformation was her punishment, a curse from the spirits she had dared to summon. She was condemned to wander the forest alone, neither fully human nor animal, a living symbol of the consequences of jealousy and deceit. Back in Iroko, the villagers mourned the loss of their warrior, Olu, whose injuries proved too great for even the priestess to heal. His final act of bravery, rescuing his son, cemented his legacy as a hero. The villagers gathered to honor his memory, building a shrine at the heart of the village where his name and deeds would be remembered for generations. The priestess, now the guardian of Olu's son, raised the child with wisdom and love. She named him Teyo, meaning joy, in honor of the happiness he represented even amidst the tragedy of his parents' loss. Teyo grew into a strong and noble warrior, embodying the best traits of both his father and mother. Guided by the priestess's teachings, he became a unifying force in Iroko, restoring peace and prosperity to the village. As Teyo grew older, he sought to avenge his father's sacrifices. He led a band of warriors to confront the Zuba clan, defeating them in a decisive battle that ended their threat to Iroko once and for all. The villagers celebrated his victory, hailing him as a savior who had fulfilled his father's legacy. The priestess, now an elder, gathered the villagers one last time to tell the full story of what had transpired. Standing before them, her voice carried the weight of truth. Naya's actions were born of jealousy, she said. She sought to destroy what she could not have, and in doing so, she brought ruin upon herself and nearly destroyed us all. But let her fate serve as a warning to us. Let us never allow envy or deceit to cloud our hearts. Let Olu and Adia's sacrifice remind us of the power of love and selflessness. The villagers nodded solemnly, their hearts heavy with the lessons of the past. They vowed to honor the memory of Olu and Adia by striving to build a community rooted in trust and compassion. Far away in the forest, Naya's curse continued. Her body, twisted and animalistic, reflected the darkness in her soul. She roamed the woods endlessly, her cries echoing through the trees. The spirits haunted her every step, ensuring she would never know peace. Every so often, villagers claimed to see her shadow near the forest edge. Her eyes, once bright with ambition, were now filled with regret. She dared not approach the village, knowing she would never be forgiven. She was a reminder of the price of betrayal, a living ghost haunting the lands she had once called home. As the years passed, the villagers of Iroko rebuilt their lives. The shrine to Olu and Adia became a place of pilgrimage, where people from across the region came to honor the couple who had sacrificed everything for their people. Under Teyo's leadership, Iroko flourished, becoming a beacon of hope and resilience. The story of Naya, Olu, and Adia was told for generations, passed down as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the enduring power of love and sacrifice. The villagers remembered Olu and Adia not as victims but as heroes whose legacy would never fade. And in the quiet of the forest, the wind carried their names, a soft reminder that even in tragedy, there could be hope, healing, and redemption.